The morning started like any other on Velthara Prime. Commander Velthar arrived at the security center early, his 4 arms carrying data pads and a cup of warm Kelna tea. The blue sun cast gentle light through the tall windows, and the city below hummed with peaceful activity. 15 years had passed since the war ended. 15 years since he last wore battle armor or commanded troops in combat. He should have been at peace. He settled into his chair and reviewed the day's schedule. Supply ship arrivals, diplomatic meetings, routine patrol assignments. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. His supervisor, Director Kalth, entered the room and nodded a greeting. "Quiet morning," Kalth said, activating the main display screen. "We have 3 vessels requesting docking clearance. 2 cargo freighters and 1 merchant ship." Velthar sipped his tea and watched as the first ship's identification appeared on screen. A Thraxian cargo hauler carrying medical supplies. Standard procedure. He approved the clearance. The second ship was Althorian, hauling construction materials. Another approval. Then the third ship appeared on screen. The vessel was sleek and modern, clearly built with human engineering. The crew manifest loaded, and Velthar's primary heart skipped a beat. Human names filled the list. Captain Park Taemin, First Officer Kim Bora, Engineering Chief Lee Sung-ho. 15 human crew members in total. Velthar's hand trembled. The datapad clattered onto his desk. "Commander?" Kalth looked concerned. "Is something wrong?" The room suddenly felt too small, too hot. Velthar's breathing quickened. His vision blurred at the edges. He tried to speak, but his throat had closed. On the screen, a communication request from the human ship came through. A human face appeared, smiling and professional. "This is Captain Taemin of the merchant vessel Swift Current, requesting docking clearance for trade negotiations." Velthar couldn't look away from that face. Human features, human eyes, just like the soldiers from his nightmares. His mind flashed back against his will. Plasma fire lighting up the darkness of space. The hull of a human destroyer, torn open and venting atmosphere. His unit boarding the damaged ship, expecting to find survivors ready to surrender. Instead, they found corridors turned into killing zones. Humans who should have been dead, still fighting, still screaming. "Still, Commander Velthar." Kalth's voice cut through the memory. "Are you ill?" Velthar stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. His breathing came in short gasps. Sweat beaded on his gray skin. The other security officers in the room stared at him with confusion and concern. I need air," Velthar managed to say. He rushed out of the room, leaving bewildered colleagues behind. He made it to the balcony before his legs gave out. He gripped the railing with all 4 hands, gulping down the cool morning air. Below him, the city continued its peaceful routine. Althorians walked the streets alongside Thraxians, Kelvorians, and yes, even a few humans. The war was over. Everyone had moved on, everyone except him. Kalth found him there 10 minutes later. The director approached slowly, carefully as one might approach a wounded animal. "Velthar," Kalth said softly, "talk to me. What happened in there?" Velthar kept his eyes on the distant horizon, the human ship. I cannot approve its docking. Why not? They're registered merchants. All their documents are in order, because they're human." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Kalth sighed. "The war ended 15 years ago, old friend. Humans are our allies now, our trading partners. Many live on this world peacefully. I know that," Velthar said, his voice hollow. "My mind knows that. But my body, when I saw that captain's face, I was back there. Back on that ship, back in that nightmare." Kalth placed a hand on Velthar's shoulder. "You fought in the war." "I did not. I cannot imagine what you experienced. But perhaps it is time to seek help. The Veterans Counseling Center." "No." Velthar straightened, forcing his breathing back to normal. "I am fine. It was just a momentary weakness. It will not happen again." "Velthar," I said, "I am fine." He turned to face his supervisor, trying to compose himself with dignity. "Please accept my apology for that display. It was unprofessional. Grant the humans their docking clearance. I will review the afternoon assignments from my office." Kalth studied him with worried eyes, but nodded slowly. "Very well. But Velthar, if you need to talk—" "I know where the counseling center is," Velthar cut him off. "Thank you for your concern." He returned to his office and closed the door. His hands still shook as he tried to work, but the words on the datapads blurred together meaninglessly. He kept seeing faces, human faces, some twisted in rage as they charged through impossible situations, others calm and determined as they triggered explosives that would kill themselves along with their enemies. That evening, Velthar returned home to his family. His mate Silvara greeted him with affection. Their two offspring, still young, rushed to embrace their father. He held them close, breathing in their familiar scent, trying to ground himself in this peaceful reality. "You look tired," Silvara observed as they ate dinner. "Difficult day?" "Just routine matters," Velthar lied. He had never told his family the full details of what he experienced in the war. They knew he served. They knew he fought. But they did not know about the nightmares. They did not know how some sounds or sights could send him spiraling back to those blood-soaked corridors. After the offspring went to sleep, Silvara sat beside him on their viewing platform. The stars shone above them, peaceful and distant. "There are more humans in the city now," she commented casually. "I saw 3 new families at the market today. Pleasant people. One couple has offspring the same age as ours. Perhaps they could play together." Velthar's stomach twisted. The thought of his children near humans, even human children, filled him with irrational dread. But he forced a neutral tone. "Perhaps," Silvara looked at him carefully, "you never speak of the war." "There is nothing worth speaking about. The humans we fought alongside the Thraxians and others against the Krell invasion. They helped save dozens of worlds, including some of ours. They proved themselves as allies." "I know," Velthar said quietly. "I know all of this. My mind understands. But some part cannot forget what I saw them do." "What did you see?" Velthar closed his eyes. He saw Corporal Jiwan, her arm torn off by plasma fire, still firing her weapon as she bled out. He saw Engineer Daehyun's final moment, his hand on the reactor controls, his face showing not fear but grim satisfaction. He saw hundreds of human soldiers who refused to stop, refused to surrender, refused to die quietly. "I saw monsters," he whispered. "Monsters that wore human skin." Silvara took his hand. "They were soldiers like you, fighting for their survival, for their people." "No," Velthar said, pulling away gently. "Not like me, not like anyone I have ever known. They fought like beings with nothing to lose and everything to prove." He stood and walked inside, leaving his mate on the platform. In their sleeping chamber, he lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow he would return to work. Tomorrow he would continue pretending everything was fine. Tomorrow he would avoid looking at the growing human population in his city. But he knew the truth. The war might have ended 15 years ago, but for him, it would never truly be over. The humans had won not just the war, but a permanent place in his nightmares, and now they were everywhere. 3 days after his panic attack, Velthar received the assignment he had been dreading. Director Kalth called him into the office with an apologetic expression. "I know this is difficult," Kalth said, sliding a data pad across the desk, "but you are my best security coordinator. The diplomatic reception requires someone with your experience." Velthar looked at the schedule. The reception would host representatives from 12 different species, including the newly appointed human ambassador, Ambassador Park Taemin, the same name from the merchant ship. "The same face that triggered his episode. Request reassignment," Velthar said flatly. "Put someone else on this, I cannot. The council specifically requested you. Your war record makes you the most qualified to handle high-level security." Kalth leaned forward. "Velthar, you must face this. You cannot avoid humans forever. They are part of our society now." Velthar wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, but duty had always been his anchor, even when everything else felt uncertain. He took the data pad. "When?" 5 days. "The reception is at the Grand Hall. Standard diplomatic protocols." Velthar nodded and left without another word. That night, the nightmares returned with force. He was back on the human destroyer. His unit had breached the hull, cutting through the damaged sections. They wore full combat armor and carried plasma rifles. 50 Althorian soldiers against perhaps 20 surviving humans. It should have been simple. The first corridor seemed empty. Velthar advanced with his team, scanning for life signs. The readings were scattered, inconsistent. Then the ceiling exploded. A human dropped down, her armor scorched and broken. Corporal Jiwan, her name tag read. She had lost her left arm, the stump crudely sealed with emergency foam. Blood covered her face, but her remaining hand held a rifle and she was already firing. 3 Althorians fell before anyone could react. Velthar dove for cover as the corridor erupted in chaos. The human should have been dead. Should have been unconscious from blood loss and shock. Instead, she fought like a cornered beast, screaming words that the translator rendered as, "You will not pass." It took 5 soldiers to bring her down. Even then, she kept moving, kept trying to aim her weapon until her body simply gave out. They found more humans like her throughout the ship, wounded, dying, but refusing to stop. One human, a young male named Min Su, had barricaded himself in a storage room. He had no weapons, only tools and spare parts. He used them to build traps that killed 4 more Althorians before they finally broke through. The worst came when they reached the engineering section. Engineer Dae Hun stood at the reactor controls. His leg was broken, his face pale from blood loss, but his hands were steady on the panel. Velthar's unit commander tried to negotiate through the door. "Surrender. You are defeated. We will provide medical care." Dae Hun looked at them through the viewing port. He smiled, not a cruel smile. Not insane, just calm, accepting. "No," he said in accented but clear Althorian. "You do not take this ship. You do not study our technology. You do not win." The commander tried to override the door controls, tried to stop what was clearly about to happen, but Dae Hun was faster. "For Earth," he said quietly. Then he triggered the reactor overload. Velthar woke up screaming. Silvara held him as he shook, whispering soothing words. But no words could erase the memory of that explosion, of the 20 soldiers who died, of the human who chose to destroy himself rather than surrender. The next days passed in a blur. Velthar threw himself into work, planning every detail of the reception security. He coordinated with local enforcement, arranged backup protocols, and personally inspected the venue 3 times. He did everything except think about meeting Ambassador Taemin face to face. The night of the reception arrived. The grand hall glowed with soft lights. Representatives from across the sector mingled, discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Velthar stood at his security post, monitoring the crowd through his datapad. Then Ambassador Taemin arrived. He was tall for a human, wearing formal diplomatic robes. His face was kind, his movements graceful and non-threatening. He greeted each representative warmly, speaking multiple languages with ease. Nothing about him suggested violence or danger, but Velthar saw only the ghosts behind him. Saw Jiwan's face, saw Dae Hyun's smile, saw the hundreds of human soldiers who had fought with impossible determination. Protocol required Velthar to greet the ambassador personally and confirm security arrangements. He approached slowly, every step feeling like walking through deep water. Taemin turned as Velthar neared. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Not of Velthar specifically, but of what he was. An Althorian war veteran, the ambassador's expression softened with understanding. "Commander Velthar," Taemin said, reading his name badge. "Thank you for coordinating security tonight." He extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Velthar stared at that hand. Such a simple gesture, peaceful, friendly, yet he could not move. Could not force his arm to reach out. His body locked up, trapped between duty and terror. The moment stretched uncomfortably. Other diplomats began to notice. Velthar's breathing quickened. His vision narrowed. Taemin slowly withdrew his hand. His expression held no anger or offense. "Only sadness, perhaps another time," the ambassador said softly. "Thank you for your service tonight, Commander." He moved away, engaging with a Thoraxian diplomat. The moment passed, but Velthar stood frozen, shame burning through him alongside the fear. He managed to complete his duties mechanically. The reception ended without incident. Diplomats departed satisfied. Velthar filed his security report and left, but he could not go home, not yet. Instead, he found himself walking the city streets in the late evening. His feet carried him without conscious direction until he stood before a plain building on the edge of the government district, the Veterans Counseling Center. He had walked past this building 100 times, always telling himself he did not need it. He was fine. He could handle his memories alone. Now, staring at the entrance, he realized he was lying to himself. Inside, a quiet gathering was in progress. A circle of chairs held a dozen beings, mostly Althorians, but a few other species as well. All wore the same expression of weary struggle. All were veterans. An older Althorian female noticed Velthar hovering by the door. "Please join us. We are just beginning." Velthar almost left, almost turned and walked away. But something in that female's eyes, some recognition of shared pain, made him stay. He took an empty chair. "I am Sub-Commander Rythal," she introduced herself. "I fought in the 3rd Battle Fleet during the war. We are sharing stories tonight. Would you like to begin?" Velthar shook his head. He could not speak yet. Another veteran, a younger male, spoke instead. "I was at the Battle of Kithen Station. We besieged a human position for 3 weeks. 200 humans against 5,000 of us. We had better weapons, better armor, orbital support. We should have crushed them in days." His voice grew hollow. "It took 3 weeks. They turned every room into a fortress, every corridor into a trap. When we finally broke through, only 12 humans remained alive. We lost over 2,000 soldiers taking that station." Another veteran nodded. "I was at Crimson Nebula. The humans used damaged fighters as missiles. Pilots aimed their burning ships at our cruisers and did not eject. They chose to die rather than fail their mission." The stories continued, each one a variation of the same theme. Humans who would not surrender. Who found ways to fight even when wounded. Who chose death over defeat. Finally, Rythal turned to Velthar. "You have not spoken, but I see your pain. What is your story?" Velthar's mouth was dry. He forced words out. "I boarded a disabled human destroyer. We expected to take prisoners. Instead..." He paused, fighting the memory. "Instead, we found soldiers who kept fighting even as they died. An engineer who destroyed his own ship rather than let us have it. He killed himself and 20 of my unit." "You wonder what kind of beings do this," Rythal said gently. "What kind of species produces such soldiers?" "Yes," Velthar whispered. "I wonder what kind of world creates monsters." Rythal smiled sadly. "I have spent 15 years asking that question. I have studied human history, read their literature, spoken with human veterans." She leaned forward. "They are not monsters. They are something more frightening. They are survivors I do not understand. Earth is a death world. Humans evolved fighting everything. Their own planet tried to kill them for millions of years. Then they fought each other for thousands more. War is not something they learned. It is what they are." Velthar felt cold. "Then how do we live beside them? How do we trust them?" "Because," Rythal said quietly, "they choose peace when peace is possible. They only become what we fear when they have no other choice." The meeting ended late. Velthar walked home under the stars, his mind churning with new thoughts. He had always seen humans as monsters, but perhaps that was too simple. Perhaps they were something far more complex and far more dangerous. Velthar returned to the veterans group the following week. And the week after that, each session brought new stories, new perspectives, but no real peace. He learned he was not alone in his fear. Dozens of Althorian veterans carried the same nightmares. They had all witnessed human soldiers doing the impossible. One evening, after the group session ended, Rythal invited him for a walk. They strolled through a quiet park as the twin moons rose overhead. "You're asking the wrong question," Rythal said suddenly. "What do you mean? You keep asking what kind of species produces such warriors. But that is not the important question." She paused beneath a flowering tree. "The important question is why. Why did they fight that way?" Velthar had no answer. Rythal continued. "I commanded a unit at the siege of Outpost Kython. Do you know what I remember most clearly? Not the fighting. Not the casualties. But something a human prisoner said to me." "What did they say?" "It was a young female, barely an adult. She had lost both legs defending a supply depot. As medics worked on her, I asked why she fought so desperately. We were not trying to exterminate humanity. We simply wanted them to accept our terms of surrender. Why not just give up?" Rythal's expression grew distant. She looked at me like I had asked the stupidest question in the galaxy. Then she said, "Because you wanted us on our knees. And humans do not kneel." They walked in silence for a moment before Rythal added, "I did not understand then. But I do now. For humans, surrender was not just military defeat. It was existential. They were new to the galaxy, technologically inferior, and we wanted to subjugate them. From their perspective, it was fight to the death or accept slavery." Velthar felt something shift in his understanding. He had always viewed the war from the Althorian perspective. They had superior technology and culture. They offered humans a place in the galactic order, albeit a subordinate one. Humans should have accepted. But from the human view, it must have looked very different. I need to understand them better, Velthar said quietly. I need to know what kind of world produces such determination. Then study their history, Rythal suggested. The answers are there. That night, Velthar began his research. He accessed the Galactic Library's extensive files on human civilization. What he found disturbed him more than any battlefield memory. Earth was classified as a death world. High gravity, extreme climate variations, active geology, and an ecosystem designed to produce apex predators. Humans evolved not as the strongest species on their planet, but as the smartest. They survived by being clever, adaptable, and absolutely relentless. Then came their own history. Humans spent 10,000 years fighting each other. Their world had never known global peace. Every continent bore scars from countless wars. Their literature celebrated warriors. Their culture glorified struggle and perseverance. Velthar read about battles where human armies fought until they were destroyed, about cities that resisted sieges for years, about soldiers who charged machine guns knowing they would die because their commanders ordered it, about civilians who fought occupying forces for generations. One passage from a human historical text struck him particularly hard. A human general from centuries past had said, "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." Velthar understood now. This was not just military doctrine. This was cultural DNA. Humans had survived for millennia by refusing to give up, by fighting when fighting seemed hopeless, by choosing death over submission. The galactic military analysts had completely misunderstood humans before the war. They saw a young species with inferior technology. They predicted easy victory. What they failed to account for was that humans did not fight like civilized species. They fought like survivors. Velthar spent weeks obsessed with his research. He read human literature, watched their historical recordings, studied their art. Everything pointed to the same truth. Humans were shaped by struggle. War was not something they did. It was something they were. One document particularly haunted him, a recording from the Battle of Crimson Nebula, made by a human fighter pilot named Lee Sung-ho. His ship was damaged and burning. He could have ejected and been rescued. Instead, he aimed his fighter at an Althorian cruiser. His final transmission was calm, almost peaceful. "Tell my family I love them. Tell them this mattered." Then he rammed his ship into the cruiser's bridge, killing himself and 300 Althorian crew members. Velthar watched that recording a dozen times, trying to understand. What drove someone to make that choice? Was it insanity, fanaticism, or something else? He found his answer in another human text, a poem from their ancient past. "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light." Humans did not accept defeat quietly. They raged. They fought. They burned themselves out rather than fade away. It was beautiful in a terrible way, and it was utterly alien to how Althorians thought. One evening, Silvara found him surrounded by datapads watching human historical footage. "You have been studying them for weeks," she said. "What have you learned?" "That I was wrong about them," Velthar replied. "I called them monsters, but they are not. They are something far more complex." "And does that help with your nightmares?" Velthar considered. The nightmares had not stopped. He still woke up screaming sometimes, still saw Jiwon's face and Daehyun's smile, but understanding helped. Slightly. "It helps me see them as people," he said. "Not just as the enemy." "Good." Silvara sat beside him. "Because Ambassador Taemin has requested a meeting with you." Velthar's heart skipped.
"What? Why?"
He did not say. Only that he wishes to speak with you privately. No official business, just conversation. She touched his arm gently. "You can refuse." Velthar almost did refuse. The thought of sitting across from a human, even in a peaceful setting, still triggered anxiety. But he thought of Rithal's words. He thought of all his research. He thought of that young human female who said humans do not kneel. "I will meet him," Velthar said. 3 days later, Velthar arrived at a small cafe in the diplomatic quarter. Taemin was already there, sitting at an outdoor table with a cup of something steaming. He stood when Velthar approached. "Thank you for coming," Taemin said. "Please sit." "Would you like something to drink?" Velthar sat stiffly. "No, thank you. They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Velthar studied the human's face. Up close, he could see fine lines around the eyes. Scars on the hands. This was not just a diplomat. This was someone who had seen combat. I was a naval captain during the war, Taman said, as if reading his thoughts. I fought in 7 major battles, including Crimson Nebula. Velthar's breath caught. I was at Crimson Nebula. I know. Taman's expression was sad. I can see it in your eyes. The same look my veterans have. You saw things that will never leave you. Your pilot, Velthar said quietly. Sung-Ho. He destroyed the cruiser I was serving on. Killed 300 of my comrades. He was my wingman, Taman replied. My friend. He had a wife and a daughter. He chose to die rather than fail his mission. I listened to his final transmission. I heard him say goodbye. They sat in heavy silence, 2 veterans from opposite sides carrying the same burden of memory. I need to understand, Velthar finally said. Why did you fight that way? Why would Sung-Ho choose death? Why would your soldiers continue fighting even when wounded? Why would your engineer destroy his own ship? Taman looked out at the city. Because we had no choice. Not really. Your empire wanted to subjugate us, make us a client state. We were new to the galaxy, weak alone. If we accepted your terms, we would never be free again. But the cost, Velthar said. The deaths. The destruction. Was it worth it? Was freedom worth it? Taman met his eyes. Yes, always. Humans have spent our entire history fighting for freedom. Fighting against nature. Against tyranny. Against anything that tried to control us. We would rather die than live on our knees. You terrified us, Velthar admitted. Your species terrified every race that fought you. We had never seen anything like it. I know. Taman's voice softened. And I am sorry for that. War makes monsters of everyone. But understand this, Commander. We were not trying to be frightening. We were not trying to be cruel. We were simply trying to survive. And survival meant fighting with everything we had. Velthar felt something inside him crack. For 15 years, he had carried hate and fear. But sitting across from this human, hearing his words, seeing the same pain in his eyes, Velthar realized something. They were not so different. Both veterans. Both haunted. Both trying to understand how they survived when so many did not. I have nightmares, Velthar said quietly. About the soldiers I saw. About the ship we boarded. So do I, Taman replied. About the orders I gave. About the crew members who died following those orders. They talked until the stars came out. The conversation in the cafe changed something fundamental in Velthar. He began meeting with Taman regularly, sometimes just for tea, sometimes for long walks through the city. Each meeting peeled back another layer of misunderstanding. One afternoon, they sat in a garden overlooking the river. Children played nearby, both Althorian and human, their laughter mixing in the warm air. Tell me about Crimson Nebula, Velthar said. From your perspective. Taman was quiet for a long moment. It was our first major fleet engagement. We were outnumbered 3-1. Our ships were older, our weapons less powerful. Military analysts gave us a 5% chance of victory. Yet you won. We survived, Taman corrected. There is a difference. We lost 60% of our fleet. Thousands of crew members died. Including my closest friend. He paused. But we held the line. We stopped your advance, and that mattered. Sung-Ho, Velthar said, remembering the name. Yes, he and I grew up together, joined the Navy together. His daughter was 3 years old when the war started. Taman's voice grew rough. When his fighter was hit, I ordered him to eject. He refused, said his trajectory was perfect. Said he could take out the command cruiser, my cruiser. Yes, I tried to order him again, but he cut transmission. The last thing I heard was him singing. Some old song his grandmother taught him. Then the impact. Taman wiped his eyes. I carry that moment with me every day. The knowledge that I could have saved him. Should have pulled rank, insisted he eject. He made his choice, Velthar said quietly. Did he? Or did we as a species create a culture that glorified sacrifice? That made dying for the cause seem honorable? Taman shook his head. I wonder sometimes if we are wrong. If our refusal to surrender, our willingness to die, is actually a flaw rather than a strength. This surprised Velthar. You doubt your own nature? Do you not doubt yours? You were a soldier. You followed orders. You saw terrible things. Do you ever question whether the war was necessary? Velthar thought about the destroyer. About Ji-won and Dae-hyun, about all the young soldiers on both sides who died for decisions made by leaders far from the battlefield. Every day, he admitted, they watched the children play. A young human girl chased an Althorian boy through the grass. They were laughing, oblivious to the complicated history their species shared. My daughter is grown now, Taemin said. She studies art at the university. She has never known war. Sometimes I look at her and think about all the children who never got that chance. Human children, Althorian children. They died because we could not find peace. We found it eventually. At what cost? Taemin's voice was heavy. 3 million humans dead. Nearly 2 million Althorians. Countless others from species drawn into the conflict. Was my friend's sacrifice worth it? Was your trauma worth it? Velthar had no answer. He had asked himself the same questions countless times. There is someone I want you to meet, Taemin said suddenly. If you are willing, who? Another veteran, human. She served as a Marine. Fought in ground campaigns across 7 worlds. Taemin met his eyes. She struggles too. Perhaps talking to her would help you both. Velthar's first instinct was to refuse, but he had come this far. He nodded. 2 days later, Velthar found himself in a small apartment in the human residential quarter. A woman answered the door. She was older, perhaps 50 in human years. Her left arm was cybernetic and scars marked her face. Commander Velthar, she said in slightly accented Althorian, I am Park Hyojin. Please come in. Her apartment was simple but comfortable. Photos covered one wall. Family, Velthar assumed. A younger Hyojin in military uniform appeared in several pictures, always smiling. Taemin said you wanted to understand humans, Hyojin said, serving tea. What do you want to know? Why you fought the way you did. Why you would not surrender even when wounded. Even when dying. Hyojin settled into her chair. I was at the Battle of Keithan Station. I do not know if you heard of it. Velthar's breath caught. I heard of it. 200 humans held against 5,000 Althorians for 3 weeks. I was one of the 200. I commanded a platoon defending the western sector. Her expression grew distant. We knew we could not win. We knew reinforcements were not coming. Our orders were to hold for 72 hours to allow civilian evacuations. We held for 21 days. How? By paying for every meter with blood. Hyojin's voice was flat, emotionless in the way of someone who had told this story many times. We started with 200 Marines. After the first week, we were down to 87. After 2 weeks, 31. When you finally broke through, 12 of us remained alive. Why not surrender? Because those civilians needed time. Because we had orders, because... She paused. Because we were Marines. And Marines do not quit. Even at the cost of your life? Especially then. Hyojin looked at her cybernetic arm. I lost this arm on day 19. Plasma grenade. I should have fallen back to medical. Instead, I kept fighting. Do you know why? Velthar shook his head. Because my sergeant, a man named Kim Jae-won, had lost both legs on day 16. He was still fighting from a fixed position, refusing evacuation. If he could keep going, how could I quit? She smiled bitterly. We pushed each other to extremes. Each of us refusing to be the one who gave up first. That seems, Velthar searched for the word. Insane, it was. We were not rational by the end. We were running on adrenaline, painkillers, and sheer stubbornness. Half of us should have been dead from our wounds. But we kept fighting because that is what humans do. We endure, she leaned forward. Let me tell you something about humans, Commander. Our planet tried to kill us for millions of years. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, predators. We should have gone extinct a dozen times. But we did not. We survived through sheer refusal to die. That is what Taemin said, that you are survivors. We are. And when you attacked us, when you threatened our freedom, we responded the only way we know how. We fought. We bled. We died. But we did not surrender. Hyojin's expression softened. I know what you saw frightened you. I know we seemed like monsters. But try to understand. We were terrified too. You had better weapons, better ships, more soldiers. We had only our determination. So we used it. Velthar felt tears forming. I boarded a destroyer. I watched your soldiers fight even as they died. An engineer named Dae-hyun destroyed his own ship rather than let us have it. He killed himself and 20 of my unit. I knew Dae-hyun, Hyojin said quietly. We served together before he transferred to the Navy. He was gentle, kind, loved music and poetry. War made him into something else. Made all of us into something else. Does it ever get better? The nightmares? No, but you learn to live with them. You learn that the person you were in war is not the person you are now. She reached across and touched his hand with her human hand, not the cybernetic one. We were both soldiers. We both did terrible things. We both carry scars, but the war is over. We can choose peace now. I want to, Velthar said, but I do not know how. Start by forgiving yourself, for surviving, for your trauma, for being afraid. Hyejin squeezed his hand gently, and then try to see us not as the enemy you fought, but as people trying to heal just like you. They talked for hours. Hyejin told him about the Marine who held a position for 16 hours with a broken spine, about the pilot who landed a damaged transport through enemy fire to evacuate wounded, about the medic who died shielding patients from artillery. But she also told him about veterans struggling with guilt and trauma, about humans who woke up screaming from nightmares, about soldiers who could not adjust to peace after years of war. We are not so different, Hyejin said as Velthar prepared to leave. Your people suffer too. War damages everyone it touches. Walking home, Velthar felt something shift inside him. The fear remained. The nightmares would not vanish. But now he understood something crucial. Humans were not monsters. They were people. Damaged people, perhaps. People shaped by a brutal history and a death world. People who responded to existential threats with extreme violence, but still people. And if he could see them as people, perhaps he could begin to heal. That night, he told Silvara about his meetings. About Taemin and Hyejin, about the conversations that had shaken his understanding. I think I am ready, he said. Ready for what? To let our offspring play with human children. To stop seeing them as threats. To try living in peace. Silvara smiled and held him close. I am proud of you. But even as he said it, Velthar knew the journey was far from over. Understanding was one thing. True peace would take much more. Velthar's progress was slow but steady.
He continued meeting with Taemin and Hyejin.
He attended veteran support groups regularly. He read more about human culture and history. Slowly, carefully, he began to separate his wartime memories from his present reality. Then, 6 months after his first panic attack, the crisis came. Velthar was home with his family when his communicator buzzed urgently. Director Kalth's voice was tense. We have a situation. Reports of suspicious activity near the human embassy. Possible security threat. I need you here now. Velthar arrived at the security center within minutes. The main display showed surveillance footage of the embassy district. A group of Althorians were gathering, some carrying signs, others just standing in angry clusters. Anti-human protesters, Kalth explained. Normally not a problem, but we intercepted communications suggesting something more serious. He brought up decoded messages. Velthar read them with growing horror. A group calling itself the True Althorian Front planned an attack on the embassy. The messages spoke of cleansing the planet and removing the human threat. Who are these people? Velthar demanded. War veterans mostly. Soldiers who never accepted the peace. They view humans as dangerous and want them expelled from Althorian space. Kalth looked at him seriously. Some of them served in your unit during the war. Velthar felt sick. He recognized names in the intelligence reports. Soldiers he had fought beside. People who shared his nightmares but responded with hate instead of seeking understanding. When is the attack planned? Tonight. During a cultural exchange event at the embassy. Over 200 people will be there, including families, children. Velthar did not hesitate. What do you need me to do? We are coordinating with human embassy security. Their chief is Captain Kim Bo-Ra, former military. She's on her way here now. Kalth paused. Velthar, I need you to work directly with her. Your experience and her knowledge of the embassy layout are essential. The door opened and Captain Bo-Ra entered. She was young for her rank, perhaps 30 human years. Her eyes were sharp and alert. She moved with military precision. Commander Velthar, she said, extending her hand. Captain Bo-Ra, I understand we are working together. Velthar looked at her hand. 6 months ago, he could not have taken it. Now he reached out and clasped it firmly. Captain, tell me about your security setup. They worked quickly, coordinating response teams and evacuation plans. Bo-Ra was professional and efficient. As they reviewed embassy layouts, Velthar found himself impressed by her tactical thinking. You were military, he observed. Naval security. Served on 3 destroyers during the war. She glanced at him. I know what you are thinking. You are wondering if I am afraid. Working with former enemies. Are you? Every day? She smiled without humor. But I do my job anyway. Fear does not get to control my life. Velthar understood that feeling completely. As evening approached, they moved teams into position around the embassy. The cultural event began on schedule. Inside, humans and Althorians mingled peacefully, sharing food and music. Outside, Velthar and Bora waited with security teams. Feels wrong, Bora muttered. Waiting for violence during a peace celebration. Violence always feels wrong during peacetime, Velthar replied. But it comes anyway. At precisely 8:30, the sensors picked up movement. A vehicle approached the embassy at high speed. Velthar recognized the driver from the intelligence photos. One of his former unit members. Intercept team, move now, he ordered. The response was swift, but not swift enough. The vehicle crashed through the outer barrier. Armed Althorians emerged, firing weapons. Inside the embassy, people screamed. Velthar and Bora moved together, coordinating their teams. It was strange, fighting beside humans instead of against them, but there was no time to reflect on the irony. The attackers were well-trained, clearly military veterans. They moved with practiced efficiency toward the embassy entrance. Velthar saw their leader, a former commander named Rithos. They had served together at Crimson Nebula. Rithos, Velthar called out. Stand down. This ends now. Rithos turned, his weapon raised. You? You betray your own people for them? For the monsters who killed our comrades? They are not monsters. They are people. Just like us, you have gone soft, Velthar. You have forgotten what they did. What they are. Rithos aimed his weapon at the embassy doors. They are a threat. They will always be a threat. Better to end it now. There are children in there, Velthar said desperately. Althorian children. Human children. Innocents. Casualties of necessary action. Rithos's finger moved toward the trigger. Velthar had no choice. He fired. His plasma bolt caught Rithos in the shoulder, spinning him around. The weapon fell from his hands. Other attackers were subdued by security teams. The assault was over in minutes, but not without cost. Inside the embassy, medics worked frantically. One human guard, a young male named Private Lee Minsu, had been hit by weapons fire. He was bleeding badly, his uniform soaked red. Velthar knelt beside him while medics worked. The young human looked up at him with clouding eyes. Did we stop them? Yes, you stopped them. You protected everyone inside. Minsu smiled weakly. Good, that is what matters, he coughed. Guess I am keeping up the human reputation. For stubbornness. Stay with me, Velthar urged as the medics applied emergency treatments. Help is coming. Tell my mom. Tell her it mattered. You will tell her yourself, Velthar insisted. But his hands were covered in human blood, and he flashed back to Ji-Wan, to Dae-Hyun, to all the humans who had bled fighting him. Now he fought to save one. The medical team stabilized Minsu and rushed him to the hospital. Velthar stood looking at his blood-covered hands. Bora approached, her expression grim. He will make it, she said. Strong kid. Stubborn, like you said. This should not have happened. We are at peace, and peace is fragile, built on the efforts of people like you and me. Bora looked at the embassy where families were being evacuated. Those children in there, human and Althorian, they will remember tonight. They will remember that we protected them together. At the hospital, Velthar waited in a corridor with Bora, Tai-Min, Haya-Jin, and several other humans and Althorians. When the doctor emerged with good news that Minsu would survive, relief swept through the group. Tai-Min approached Velthar. Thank you for stopping the attack, for protecting our people. They are not just your people anymore, Velthar said. They are all our people now. In the waiting room, humans and Althorians sat together. Some cried, some talked quietly, some just sat in exhausted silence. Velthar listened to their conversations. A human mother spoke about her daughter's fear. An Althorian father worried about his son's nightmares. Their concerns were identical. Their love for their offspring transcended species. Heejin sat beside Velthar. You did well tonight. Saved many lives. I also shot someone I served with. Someone who shared my nightmares. He chose hate. You chose understanding. That is the difference. She looked at the mixed group around them. This is what the future looks like. Not always easy. Not always peaceful. But possible. Days later, Velthar was asked to speak at a gathering for veterans of both species. He stood before hundreds of former soldiers, Althorian and human, all carrying the same burden of memory. "I have spent 15 years afraid," he began. "Afraid of humans? Afraid of my memories, afraid of my own trauma. I thought humans were monsters because of what I witnessed during the war." He paused, looking at the human veterans in attendance. "I was wrong. Not about what I saw. That was real. The violence was real. The horror was real. But my interpretation was wrong. Humans fought with impossible determination. They refused to surrender even when dying. They used tactics that seemed insane. And yes, they terrified us. But I understand now. They were not monsters. They were people fighting for their survival, for their freedom, for their future. And we, the Althorians, were not innocent. We initiated the conflict. We demanded their submission. From their perspective, we were the monsters. We were the existential threat." He saw some Althorian veterans nodding. Others looked uncomfortable. "I cannot tell you that the memories will fade. Mine have not. I still wake up from nightmares. I still see faces of the humans I fought. But I have learned to see those memories in context. Those soldiers were not evil. They were desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. The war is over. We can choose how we move forward. We can choose hate and fear, like the attackers at the embassy, or we can choose understanding. We can recognize that both sides suffered. Both sides lost. Both sides carry scars." He looked at Taemin and Hyejin, standing together with other human veterans. "I have met humans who struggle with what they did during the war, who carry guilt for the violence they inflicted. They are not proud of being monsters. They are trying to heal just like us. So I ask you all on both sides to try to see your former enemies as people. Try to understand why they fought. Try to build peace not just between our governments but between ourselves." The gathering ended with quiet conversations between former enemies. Velthar saw an Althorian veteran shaking hands with a human marine. Saw tears and embraces. Saw the beginning of real healing. Months passed. Velthar continued his work and his therapy. He watched his offspring play with human children in the park.